So next we have a panel. The panel is Data Enrichment is Alive and Well. And we all know first-party data is all the rage, and while certainly valuable, it only presents one flavour of the customer for a brand. And that's where data enrichment comes in. Third-party data is alive and well and available as ever thanks to identity solutions. So our next set of speakers will discuss the importance of identity coupled with data enrichment to drive the business outcome brands want. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Hashmi Navin, EMEA Client Success Director at Lotame, and our panelists, Leighton Spalding, Head of Audience Planning and Programmatic, Havas Media Group London, Martin Beauchamp, Head of Data Strategy at Wavemaker UK, João Nunes, Chief Transformation Officer, IPG Media Brands Portugal, and Fern Potter, Global Chief Strategy Officer at Hybrid Theory.
Thank you, Alison. We have a great range of perspectives across the buy side on this panel. I'd love to know where data enrichment and third-party data plays a role for each of your teams. Targeting, analytics, for each of you, how does the ability to leverage data enrichment add value to your services and offerings?
Yeah, I can jump in there. I think it's such a great question, and thank you so much for the introduction invite today. For us at Hybrid Theory, it's integral to what we're doing, and I think the reason that is because it's so integral to businesses and outputs at the moment. So the way we kind of approach our thought leadership and as an organization is to look at what we're trying to solve for businesses, look at what the business outcomes need to be or what the client experience needs to deliver, and then from there go, well, what data sources, what enrichment do we need to actually make this happen? What data are we going to structure and model to ensure that the outcomes really match the need the business has? And I think I was reading a fact by McKinsey recently that 95% of CMOs are so worried about the data structure, the unstructured data, that exists out there. How they pull all those different elements together is to get to that outcome is integral to that part of the business. So I think, as I said, the way we look at it is really making sure we're going from an outcomes perspective, looking at those use cases, and that includes data enrichment as well as first party data, second, or even signals that we can model out there.
Yeah, I think only adding to that, that's probably a great example of what many of us do. We start very much at the planning phase and try and understand, what data is going to go into our planning, how we're going to spend our money, where that money is best spent. But equally, then we look at past performance of campaigns, what those audiences look like, how we build those audiences within different platforms, how we can then try and build those audiences with enough variation that we can then kind of try and tease that out and learn about new audiences that come along. So I guess, one of the areas that we continue to try and test is we have kind of our core focus and we're running our media on that. But then we'll go, okay, well, these are the edge cases that look like they could have kind of new ways to grow those audiences. So as we pick apart those, we go, okay, this trait is quite interesting, this feature is quite interesting on these types of people, and we try and pull that all back into ultimately the outcomes that we're trying to deliver for our clients. I think my biggest concern right now is how do we measure those outcomes, and moving forward, I think that's the area that we need to give the most attention to in a post-cookie world. But right now, it's very much kind of going on what Fern said. It's looking at what we need to do for our clients, how we need to deliver that, setting up enough test and learn processes within that to kind of tease out what's interesting, because it's all very well delivering a kind of a performance metric or a brand KPI, but it's also trying to say, and here's some insight, here's some delivery that we can give back to you so that your business can change the way that it thinks about its own consumers, because research is not always 100% accurate, at least to what happens in the online world.
Leighton?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. I don't know, I was trying to say something. Yes, completely agreed, actually. From Havas' perspective, just to build on what Martin just said, and then I think it's important to take advantage of all different types of data. And then it's not just cookie data. There's a contextual data, there's a different audience data, and then there's a deterministic data that we can always need to leverage. and then the flexibility and then how we can test and learn, and then the roadmap over the time, and in terms of the timings, and then what we learn from the testing, and then more importantly is that what we're going to do about it. And then I think it's also we learned about what has done, from the pay media, from all the audience insights. And then I think it's what's make it even more meaningful is that what we're going to tell the brands, and then how we're going to react to that insight. And then is that insight is actually insightful? I mean, that's also another bit, is that are we really analyzing the data in the right way that is for the clients? And then I think these are the questions that, regardless I think now is the perfect opportunity. We have the right technology, we have the right data suppliers, and then we have the level of flexibility that we can facilitate and all this roadmap, and then to execute it.
Oh, hold on a sec. Joel, oh, there we go. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So first of all, thank you for the invite, and hello, everybody. At Media Brands, the concept of high-value audiences has been at the core of our value proposition for quite some time now. And HVAs are fundamentally built from first-party data. Those addressable segments that have the highest impact on our clients' business. And then it is through data enrichment that we either retrieve the insights to really understand them and tailor the customer experience to drive them all the way up to conversion, or we just use those insights and even machine learning powered algorithms to create lookalike segments that we use for prospecting with upper funnel strategies. So we basically end up using data and get value out of enrichment operations, all the way from strategy and insights generation up to digital operations teams such as search, CRO, display, and addressable. They all use that and get value out of that.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. So moving on to our big news from Google last week, they've certainly kept us on our toes with all the announcements. So their delay with plans for third-party cookie deprecation in Chrome being postponed to 2023. What are your thoughts on this update, and how does this change your approach or your timeline in terms of developing a cookieless strategy and testing identity solutions?
I'll jump in on that first. I think it really doesn't change our timelines. This is still mission critical for everyone. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's going to be a slight delay or a slight pause, but Chrome is only one browser out there, and we've already got Firefox and Safari in play that have already pulled the trigger on this stuff. And then of course you've got iOS 15 coming out, and Apple playing quite an aggressive play around privacy and tracking. So for us, it's very much, we're going to our clients, we're understanding, we're auditing, we want to know what the risks are, we want to work out how we can mitigate those. At Group M, we have a wider initiative of really trying to test actively the solutions that are coming through in the market and testing them with our clients to just try and make sure that they are viable solutions moving forward. But in the end, this is a conversation that needs to happen now. It's not going away. The industry's already made some great steps in terms of coming up with ID solutions. We need to make sure that they're working. We need to make sure that we can test those properly. We need to make sure that we can contract the right partners for our clients, or get our clients to contract them directly. We also need to implement all of this stuff, and we need to adopt it at a client level and internally. So I think anyone that takes their foot off the pedal right now is kind of being very naive to what the future is going to look like. And I think we need to just carry on pushing as an industry, as an agency, as clients, because all of this stuff will impact the bottom line if we don't get it right. And it will impact also sort of the choice of media that we have to play with. So I think it's critical.
Yeah, just to complement what Martin just said, I think that while it does allow us to breathe a little bit better, and somehow just ease some of the concerns of our advertisers, it does not change the strategy. I mean, because if the change is not happening because of Google's plans and the deprecation of third-party cookies, it is happening because of other topics, such as increased privacy concerns from the consumers, and especially an increased demand of transparency and ethic usage of data by the advertisers. So our advice for clients has been, the sooner you start, the greater competitive advantage you'll have. So we're continuously pushing that topic in our agenda with clients, and pushing solutions, just as Martin says, just testing what's out there and see what works for every one of our advertisers.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a good point in terms of actually the industry shifting into, the value exchange between people that have been advertised to and the advertisers. So I think the conversations are right, and the momentum is correct as well. But I think a few of us all thought it was kind of inevitable based on the testing opportunities that we've had that this would probably be delayed. So it gives us a bit more of your momentum to gather over the next couple of years, but I think it's opened up the broader conversations that are even more important, not just the tactical details, but what consumers think about advertising, what's going to happen when we shift behind paywalls, what does subscription fatigue look like, what does consensual media and advertising look like, and how do we address those as an advertiser still to create meaningful experiences and meaningful brand experiences, but do it in the right way. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting time.
I always said to my team that we can run, but we can't hide, and so this is not something that we can hide from. And then we actually have us, and then I'm glad that firm's actually saying that the meaningful experience. That's what we have been going through within the agencies, and then just to, it sounds such a it's not a new concept obviously, but then I think it's the time that's to refocus on that, and then also looking at, and now we're taking even more time to develop better and more mature cookieless marketplace, and then so through either test and learn, through a better process of selecting the partners. And then I think this is just giving them the valuable time that we need, and then also be even more better prepared.
Brilliant. At Lotame, we've always been great proponents of first-party data and ensuring it's leveraged meaningfully for things like customer retention and engagement. How is the way all of your teams leverage first-party data different to the way you leverage third-party data? Fern, you want to take that one?
Yeah, of course, no problem. I was just being polite and waiting. It's hard it's hard virtually, isn't it? A really interesting question. Again, I think, data strategy needs to be as fluid as your kind of media optimization does these days. You need to make sure, and I think Martin mentioned it earlier, making sure that data lives and breathes throughout strategy, planning, creative deployment and development, your platform choices, your user experience, as well as the activation, where perhaps predominantly, especially with media specifically, we've really focused on using data application at activation stage. So I think we're looking at going, well, what exists, what's meaningful, how do we model it so that it can inform each stage of the journey, how do we measure it back into what we're planning as well. So making sure the custom audiences that we're creating at Hybrid Theory, we ensure that we can measure the response to be able to pull that back into the future segments that we want to, and personas that we want to activate. I think it's also really important to encourage that fluidity through first party and third party in sales and marketing. So the outcomes are not necessarily just where your media is invested, it's what your product development looks like. It's looking at how you actualize your investment data across your business to come up with, as I said, advertising or revenue strategies that deliver the business. So B2B have been doing it for a while, right? Your marketing qualified leads, your sales qualified leads, the funnel looks slightly different. I think now we're kind of merging ad tech and martech together to get this kind of true picture of a customer journey throughout your brand. And that's integral to the work that we're doing, because it just defines defines the creativity as well as the placement for each of your campaign strategies. So very important. All of them are used at different times in different ways, but you've got to have that fluidity and be able to model appropriately.
Yeah, if I may add, I think they're very complementary, right? So while it's really important for every company to adopt a first-party data strategy, the reality is that there are several challenges in place to use first-party data alone, which, apart from the simple fact that it may not be easily accessible because first-party data most often live in silos inside the company, it may also involve some aspects of data quality, such as, is it correct? Is it completed? So in order to really extract value from first-party data, in most cases, we need to use enrichment and with second and third-party data to make it, to have it corrected and completed, and most importantly, to make it useful. And then again, when we do that, I completely agree with Fern and Marty and Martin as well. It's the fluidity. Yeah, it needs to be activated in a fluid process throughout the entire customer journey. So.
And I'm going to be someone that hails GDPR as one of the greatest things that happened to our industry, only because it meant that we got to have a proper conversation around first-party data, and it meant that clients went off and structured their data and said, okay, this is what we need to collect, this is why we need to collect it, we'll have consent for it, we'll have it all in one place, so we don't have to root around for it, we don't have to necessarily find a random email list that was collected 5 years ago and see if that was still usable in some way. So I think GDPR has given us a massive leg up to have this conversation. It's allowed us to talk to different teams, which has been brilliant. And I guess all of this stuff, it comes down to how much can we leverage the data that's in front of us? How much of it is important? How much can we disregard? Like there is data that we don't need to see everything, and we don't need to use everything all of the time. And then realize where clients are on their journey, right? So clients are all at different stages. Some, have really complex MarTech solutions in place that actually allow us to do some really incredible things. And as Fern was saying, also, to dip into creative and be able to deliver some really nice experiences for customers and consumers. Others are really kind of still looking at, how to optimize their remarketing and leveraging, first-party cookies just on the basis of remarketing and building different models out of that and saying, okay, well, this is what it means to remarket to someone. This is how much they're worth, and this is how much I'm going to bid. Others will then add on third-party data on top of that to go, okay, well, what's the next stage within their purchase journey? What can we do next with them? Because we have this incremental data, so we've kind of expanded what we know about somebody. And then equally, others are kind of fully vested in, nice first-party data solution that talks specifically to client, almost like a concierge service. And that's great as well. So it really depends on how you want to think about data and how you want to deploy it, but also how much money you can make off the back of deploying that data, right? So third-party data is always seen as a cost within a campaign, right? And then everyone goes, oh, it's a bit expensive, or it can affect the ROI. First-party data is almost treated as free, even though the system in the back end is a couple of million quid that's powering over a few years. And that, I think we need to kind of rebalance those conversations to get fair equity between the two things.
I love that. I was just going to say, Martin, when you said about the GDPR pushing into first-party data and ensuring that there was consideration over that structure, I think it also helped us change the dialogue from not what data do I have, but who my customer is, and then be able to put that into strategic thinking, creative thinking, and as we said, like the media activation that we're really familiar with. But just that change in that dialogue then enabled us to go, okay, well, who else do we need to know? How do we want to scale these audiences? Who is meaningful to a brand, and what retention strategies do we put in place, as well as prospecting and growing more audiences. So I love, from a strategic perspective, love that shift in narrative, that it doesn't, the briefs aren't anymore, get me 500,000 email addresses because I need first party data. It's who's my customer, tell me more, get those insights and be able to build upon that to get traction and competitive advantage in market.
just also completely agree with that. Actually, the way that we actually also to add is that for the first party data, and the other function we also use is to almost like validate that's what other upper funnel data that we're using, and then are we found these prospective audiences, and then are they actually the same as either through lookalike or through performance, and then how we can validate them. And because a lot of audience personas that we have either before the plan has been signed off or at the planning stage, and then it's a lot of the personas that has been done, and then I think this is where the pay media activation will also play a role to validate and how valuable that audience is, and then also the custom journey that we think or we thought before that was working is actually working, and then we can use the process to validate that.
Great, thanks everyone. That was a great range of responses there, and keying into that third-party data enrichment. So a lot of Lotame's media owners and publisher partners, they see a lot more demand in activating through SSPs and deal IDs. And there's this concept of self-defined audiences and adding that data layer. Do you see yourselves working more closely with publishers and media owners in the future? And how does the Google announcement change that at all, or even speed that up?
Oh, completely. I think from Harvard's perspective, we have always been working quite closely with our partners, and then we have created this Harvard's Meaningful Marketplace, and then specifically built on our partnership with them. And then I think this is also a process that actually accelerates the partnership with them, and then so bring back even more control for the advertisers, and so we can have more flexibility delivering better performance. And then I think through this, we also have been talking to our clients around that, yes, I mean, you have all this choice, but it's not everything that is right for you. So we're here to help you to define what's actually suitable, and then to be truly sort of data-driven in terms of at the planning stage, as well as after the campaign. And then also we also to help them to define, because everyone is talking about big data, this amount of data, the volume of our data, and then how much of the volume it actually provides, but it doesn't mean that it's right for them. And then we need to help them to define the criteria that actually matter to them. And then through either, we also have analytics team to help them to do custom modeling. And then these are the criteria that we help them to train the model over the time, and then to learn the audiences, also to ingesting back to the activation platform. So we feel like this is a process we can deliver with all the partners that we have within Harvard's Meaningful Marketplace, and then also to be more future-proof in the cookieless world.
Well, to be honest, although we would love to, this is not something we do very regularly, at least here in our market. And I think this has to do with the overall maturity of our publisher landscape, and even with the lack of scale of the market itself. It's not easy for a publisher in our market to have the breadth and depth of data to make it available to advertisers, or for it to even become an interesting business for them. Nonetheless, this is something we're trying to push, and we're actually starting to include this topic in our upfront negotiations, for instance. Mm-hmm. And definitely for the last part, these announcements from Google, either moving forward or pushing back, what they're doing is causing a lot of uncertainty across the board, which ultimately creates a sense of urgency, both on agencies and marketers, but also on publishers, to find scalable and reliable alternative solutions so that we all build our safe harbors during this time frame. So this is something that we want to keep exploring, but I can't say this is something we currently do because there's not a current offer in the market.
That's really interesting because I guess in the UK we are a bit more developed in that from the publisher side of things. So I can only really give the lens of the UK market and say that, you know, I hope that we do work even more with publishers, work closer with them, partly because, you know, they were there at the beginning of the digital exercise and kind of really propelled all of our businesses into digital. We created a lot of great solutions together. We did a lot of great formats together. And I think now the kind of the adoption of them being, you know, the gatekeeper of almost a lot of the consumers from a cookie point of view or from an identity point of view will mean that we will no doubt want to do more with them and build, you know, deal IDs and special marketplaces. Partly because, you know, big data doesn't always automatically, to Litin's point, equal good data, right? There's a lot of data out there, and, you know, every time I have a conversation where somebody says I've got this much data, I'm like, okay, but it's kind of meaningless to me because you can have so much data that it's sort of lost, and I don't know where to start with it. Whereas if I know you've got very exact small scale data, but is accurate and has been collected recently rather than over the last 20 years, it then propels me into a conversation of going, okay, what can we do with that data that gives us a local edge? And I think this is the other point that publishers have the advantage over kind of the bigger platforms, is that they can play the local edge. They have local market knowledge, they have regional expertise, they'll be able to deliver campaigns on a kind of a smaller scale, but more relevant to the people that are going to see it, which means that we can both use kind of their data, our data, and then also the situational data in terms of where people are living, where they're consuming, or what events are going to be happening around them. And I think if you package all of that up, it goes back to this: we will hit people, but we'll hit people with a really good experience. And I think that's sadly what lacks in digital creativity a lot of the time, is how do we surprise and delight, you know, customers, you and I, when they go to websites, rather than annoy and get them to put their back up and go, what am I consenting to? What is this? Do I need to go through a paywall? Do I just click? Do I get an ad blocker in? Like, you know, and we don't want to be in that situation. What we want to be is saying, this content is great. These publishers are brilliant because they're providing you great content at free of charge because it's supported by advertising. And actually the advertising that goes around it is good, it's interesting, it's relevant. It may not always be completely relevant, but, you know, you've got to take some hits there and then just propel that forward. So, you know, I think that there should be more work with publishers, and we should double down on that kind of work and really try and think about how we can leverage their expertise, because they're great partners.
Okay, that was great. And actually you answered my next question about accuracy versus scale. So that's also great as well. So I'm going to dig into marketers' first-party data strategies here and through the funnel. So a lot of people think that top of the funnel and upper funnel initiatives like prospecting and consideration is really where third-party and second-party data strategies are at the forefront. What's your perspectives on different data types and how they support the customer journey? When you create different data segments, how does that define your strategies?
I'd love to chip in here, because I think it's something we've talked a lot about, the volume of data and data as the kind of commodity that we're using. But I also have to, what we do at Hybrid Theory really well is look at the technology and the talent that we have within the team. So it's always about that interpretation of the data as well that goes in. You know, unless you're asking the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers out. And I think it slightly relates to this point. Bear with me, it's a tenuous link. But when we're looking at the strategic growth, so a lot of the conversations we have internally are, how do we scale these audiences? We've got loads of data coming in. We need to look at audiences at different parts of the funnel, as you said, for awareness, prospecting, and say retention, just to simplify. Our teams are really crawling through what the business question needs, the business question we're solving for, in order to get the right data to input that into the right parts of that funnel. So one of the conversations we had recently is, as an inspiration inspirational quote that I love was Reed Hastings from Netflix, where he said, you know, Netflix is not competing with Disney Plus or whatever, they're competing with sleep. I think that's the way we start looking at our data strategy when it comes to audiences, is going lateral. So not just thinking about if you're looking for a car versus another car brand, but actually, how do you get the right data in place for awareness to trigger the audience to start thinking about whether they want to spend their disposable income on a holiday or on a car. And so understanding the customer journey throughout that funnel is paramount to then determining what the data strategy is that goes alongside that. And the APIs or CRMs or feeds or whatever you want to call them that then make that as responsive as possible. So long-winded answer and response to the question. I think there needs to be fluidity, but I think you want to really take it back to the people that are setting the strategy in the first place, because that's where they start looking at what the journey is and therefore how the audience and the data can play a part in that. And I think there's a lot of strategic brains within our company that start looking at driving those custom audiences into different places and just being able to scale them up. So it's a bit about thinking laterally, but also about being able to place the right kind of data in the right part of the funnel, as you said.
And then I'll go in next then. So I think the idea around third-party data, I still think, as your questions sort of states, it is at the top. It's where we really don't know that much about the consumer, and it's about us taking what we understand from research or from customers that already are there and kind of building out personas and building out audiences that somewhat match what we think we need, right? And I'll use my example of earlier on, or as I said earlier on, we try and build that a little bit wider than perhaps what we'd ordinarily go in, just so that we have these fringe cases so that we can kind of build out new shoots of targeting parameters. Second party data is depends on how you want to define second party data. I think the world that we live in at the moment, if we use advertisers sharing data to other advertisers, I think that's quite niche at the moment, and those conversations are only just starting to happen. And I'd like to see more of that, of course. I think there's great value in data co-ops between brands that are non-competitive and brands that are kind of in the same supply chain, working together to try and maximize value for both parties. And I'm sure that will come on stream, particularly now that everybody's looking at how they can collect better first-party data and know that it's consented and know that they can share it with other companies, right? So those three things kind of needed to come together. I think GDPR again. That's my shout out to GDPR. And then I think when we get down into the first-party data, it is really understanding how we can leverage that data to the point where it's meaningful as an experience to the consumer, but isn't annoying. And we always use the example of, remember that sofa that you bought 3 months ago and it's still haunting you on the web, or then the pair of trainers that you bought last week and it still haunts you on the web. And that's mostly because there's either too many people on plan, right? And there's one company doing one part of performance media and another company doing another part of performance media, and nobody's clearing out the cookies quickly enough, or nobody's looking at the conversion events quickly enough, or it's people being kind of lazy and not doing their job and trying to make sure that the funnel is as clean as possible. So I think that answers the question, but essentially it's about us trying to make sure that we structure each one of those layers in a seamless fashion, with that middle layer not necessarily being as fat and as interesting as we'd like, but I think that's going to come.
I think one thing, in addition to that's the brilliant point that's from Fern and Martin. I think one thing what I really want to highlight is that from second party and third party data, they are actually it's quite powerful in the way that if you work with the data suppliers and then get a custom built prediction or predicted segments built, and then I think it's quite an interesting way to recognize the audience behavior trends, and then in advance. And then I think before it actually becomes the actual, become the brand, or the actual audience. Because ultimately in this uncertain time, and then the existing audience, their behavior changes, and then their mindset changes. And then I think we will have to look at all different types of data in the whole mix, and then to take advantage of the mix as well. So I think and I think that's what the approach that we have been recommending, because I think this is one of the cases that we have done is looking at preempt, and then any audience's behavior has changed, and then we activate the campaign before that, and then in line with and then adding that into the existing audiences. So and I think that we've, from all the experience, we feel that has worked really well.
Great.
Yeah, I think your question poses some considerations about the use cases for each of the data type. That it may be true if we're looking at some of the most common use cases, such as retargeting, churn reduction or retention, increasing loyalty or engagement. Yeah, these are the most use cases, but these are all do and care tactics, where first-party data activation in as is form is key. Nonetheless, we do use first-party data as our stepstone to design prospecting or consideration data activation tactics. We start from first-party data, and then we add layers of second or third-party data according to the use case and the category or segment of the advertiser. And that enrichment process basically for us results in a wealth of insights, but also new enriched segments that we then activate through our channels. And I think that for us, the same goes, and this is something that we've been building for quite some time now. It's when understanding consumer journey and designing personas, for instance, we always start with first-party data, and then through enrichment we try to understand, what moves them, what are their interests, what is the key behavior behind each of the audience segments that we can drive and activate.
Great, thanks so much. That was really, really great responses from all of you. And I want to end this session with a quick one answer response to this. But there are so many changes in the ad tech industry today. The rise of walled gardens, deprecation of third-party cookies, changes to IDFA and privacy legislation. Given all of that, in one word, what do you think is the biggest challenge you will face over the next couple of years?
Attribution. This is my one word.
Great.
Yeah, measurement.
To deliver the meaningfulness. So
yeah. Mine was around value, which you can interpret into measurement, attribution, or customer experience. So I'm cheating slightly, but yeah, I'd say value.
Well, thank you all so much. That was a really great panel. And yeah, over to you, Alison.